Hello? Yeah, this is Claire. Today we're talking about autism and being on the phone. Stick around? Hi friends! My name is Claire and this is my channel, Woodshed Theory. Here, I make content about what it is like to live as an adult on the autism spectrum and whatever else feels good to me. So if that sounds good to you, or if you're feeling particularly gracious today, and I hope that you are, please go ahead and click the subscribe button, ring the bell. I almost forgot to mention that I put out videos 3 times a week. Click the like, click the like. Autism and the phone, and my tips for making it more tolerable. Friends, I have to say that I don't feel like I'm the most qualified person to discuss this topic because boy, do I struggle with being on the phone as an autistic person. However, several of you have brought this up as a topic, and I think it's a great topic and would be super helpful. And you know that on this channel, we do not shy away from topics that scare us or that are taboo. So we're gonna talk about it, autism and the phone. I actually used to work in a job where I had to make at least 60 calls a day. There were some special days where I made up to 100 calls a day. Can you even imagine 100 calls in one day? There is no doubt in my mind that it's one of the big reasons that I was constantly stressed out, constantly burned out. One of the things I think is the funniest about having to be on the phone for so much of the day was looking back as somebody who wasn't diagnosed at the time. I definitely had a very autistic way of having to be on the phone. I remember when I first started that job having people tell me that I sounded so good, so professional, but I sounded like a robot. Especially leaving messages, I could make myself sound exactly the same every time with the same tone and the same message. And that's really how I was able to get through so many calls in a day, because I had a script together and a phone voice together, and I was able to just turn off my mind and leave the messages, which probably wasn't the most personal thing to listen to, but it's how I functioned. Second, as I mentioned, I prepare for most of my calls by writing out scripts and following a pattern to get information. And this worked out just fine for me with the way that the company functioned because autistic people tend to use scripts to communicate. In fact, I'm reading up of a script right now, but I'm really trying to use the scripts now as more of a guideline because you all like it when I'm more off the cuff and natural. So I just have like points written down and I'm trying not to read the script. Anyway, on to the rest of the video. So with all of these struggles in mind that I have personally, and knowing that almost all autistic people really struggle making phone calls, I thought I would go through, in my mind, what a lot of my issues are with being on the phone and probably your issues. And then as I go through them, I'll address some ways that have helped me be better at being on the phone. All of this to say, autistic people don't always need to accommodate neurotypical people. I feel very strongly about this. If you cannot do phone calls, there are other ways to work around that, and you should feel comfortable being able to get accommodations that fit your needs. I know it's not always possible and sometimes we have to be on the phone, so we're gonna talk about it, but you do you. So I figure that there are a few reasons that people on the spectrum struggle with the phone. Number one, delayed processing and being expected to answer and come up with responses right away. This is also hard for us because with delayed processing, we might come up with an answer and start talking later than the person had anticipated the answer, and then you get the talking over each other effect. Another thing is you don't have a mouth to watch to follow along and make sure you're getting the words right and understanding people correctly. Then, as I mentioned before, there's the issue of not being able to tell when a pause is just a pause in someone's thought, or if they're finished speaking and your turn to speak has come up. That's like a big one for me. It's the biggest thing I hate about being on the phone, is interrupting people and then being considered rude because I can't tell when it's my turn to speak and I'm not doing it on purpose. Then you have dealing with the anxiety of a phone call, not knowing what's going to happen, which way the conversation's going to go. It's a lot to take on. And then finally, being on the phone, thinking you did a good job, but then realizing afterwards that you forgot what you were supposed to talk about. You didn't get the information that you needed to get by talking on the phone, and then not wanting to call back because that's embarrassing, or you know that they're not going to answer, etc., etc. The first thing I thought we'd talk about is having trouble concentrating and listening to what somebody is saying when you're on the phone. I really struggle taking on auditory information. It is not something that I excel in at all. I remember trying to learn a language, and we did an exercise where we went to a listening lab and we're listening to the other language. I just take a minute to process what I'm hearing anyway, so doing it in a different language was difficult. So listening to auditory information on the phone, that's really hard for me. It's hard to follow along with what a person is saying if I can't see their face. It's weird because I know I don't make good eye contact, but not being able to see someone's mouth move is just hard for me to process the information. Also under this category, as we were talking about, is that delayed processing thing. Always feeling like even if you did listen, at the end of the phone call, you forget what was said because you were overwhelmed with trying to listen to the words that were being said and take in the information. So my solution for this is stimming. For me, it's note-taking. I always take notes and doodle if I'm on a phone call where I need to hear the information, or if I'm on a phone call where I need to retain the information, I am writing notes down as detailed as I can. It's not great for back and forth, but otherwise I'm not going to remember all of the information I was supposed to get out of the phone call. Or I'm doodling during a conversation so that I can focus on what's being said and not what's going on around me. If I'm not writing notes on a call and it's more of a casual conversation, I find it very difficult to sit still. The best way for me to focus on the conversation is to be moving. I usually am pacing. I don't even know that I'm doing it until somebody points it out to me. But if I'm having like a personal call as opposed to a business call, I am pacing the room. If I can't pace, I'm probably wrapped up in a blanket to make myself feel more comfortable. So my advice for being able to focus on the phone call is to be stimming so that you can use the stim as a way to regulate and focus on what's going on during the call. Another way that I handle the slow or delayed processing issue is to prepare for important calls by reviewing information and getting ready to know what to say. For things like business calls or making appointments, I think it's totally okay to have a script ready. If you're nervous about that, it's not something I necessarily struggle with, but there are things I struggle with. In the past, as far as business calls where I had to get certain information or needed to know things, I would absolutely write a script, write a list of information that I needed to get, just so I made sure I was checking off those boxes and getting the information. But this can go for ordering a pizza over the phone or making a dentist appointment. Writing out exactly what needs to be said, what information that you have to give is a great way to get ready for the call and make yourself a lot less nervous. Now, a problem that we have as autistic people is what happens if you go off script. So I think a good way to combat this is to anticipate how you may go off script and be more general with that part of the preparation. So you can have your script ready, but a lot of times during phone calls, things go off script. That's totally normal. It usually always happens because you can't anticipate the other person and what they're going to say and what they're going to want to talk about, etc. So if there's something in particular that you need to do, go ahead and write down that script. If you think, for example, they might ask a generalized question, then have some of that ready on the sheet where you're writing your script down, and just be prepared for that. Be prepared that things are not going to go to plan and you might have to go off script by anticipating that beforehand, and that has really helped me. Like if you think that you're going to call your doctor, you get an office worker on the phone, you want to make an appointment, and they start asking how your pets are doing, you might forget what you're actually calling for because that was not part of your script. But maybe they met your dog once and they're like, whoa, how's the dog? And you're like, oh, the dog is fine, but then you forget everything else you're going to say. So I don't know, just generally preparing for a call is totally okay. Also, just be aware that there might be things that come up where it wasn't planned that you were going to talk about that. Don't panic, just do your best. It's fine. Artistic people can struggle to improvise. Help yourself out by preparing some improvisation. You got this, you could do it. My biggest issue with being on the phone, when to speak. This is something I really struggle with. I feel that I have gotten better at this, but talking over people, or sometimes you'll just get on a phone call with somebody that you don't know and you both keep talking over each other. And there's a lot of that really infuriating, no, you go ahead. Oh, no, you go ahead. And then it keeps happening and it just keeps getting worse and worse. I hate that. The only thing I can say to that is to take a deep breath before you answer. It might seem weird to them, like maybe that there's a pause, but you're giving the space to make sure that it's your turn to speak. Because as I mentioned, one of the hardest things for me is it my turn to speak or are they just pausing? So give that extra second to yourself to see if they're finished speaking, take a deep breath, and then continue. That has helped me a lot when I'm not sure if it's my turn to speak. That's my biggest issue. I can't see your face. I can't see anything. I struggle with interrupting people when I'm face to face with them. So to expect me to do it on the phone is really hard for me, and it just totally throws me off, and I forget about what I'm gonna say. So yeah, I would just take a deep breath before speaking if you're not sure if it's your turn. My other advice is do not be too hard on yourself. If there's anything I learned from having to make 60 phone calls a day, is that the person on the other line isn't gonna care about what you said or what you did or how you did on the phone, especially in a business sense. Most of the calls that you have to make during the day involve people who are also on the phone for most of the day. They're just doing their jobs and they take lots of calls during the day. So unless you do something totally out there, they're not going to think about it again. And that's something I think that's hard, because when you make a social mistake as an autistic person, you usually end up obsessing about it and worrying about it. But most people aren't even going to remember that they spoke to you. So try not to be too hard on yourself. People are going about their jobs and their lives, and they're not thinking about the stupid thing that you messed up saying or that you accidentally interrupted them. They're just trying to go about their day. So they're taking your pizza order or setting up an appointment and they're doing something else. The final thing that I wanted to say is something I said at the beginning, and that's just be yourself. If you don't like to be on the phone and it's something that is a big enough deal to you, there are so many ways around it. I'm not saying that you should force other people to do your phone calls for you, because I know that some people do that. They're like, you do it, you do it. We should be able to be autonomous as much as we can. And I know a lot of us don't like asking for help. So my solution to a lot of it is find workarounds. You can schedule things online. You can order your food online. Heck, you don't even have to have the DoorDasher look at your face. They could just drop it on your porch. So there are so many workarounds where you don't have to be on the phone anymore. My other thing is, if you get on the phone and you're feeling brave, you can say, hey, phone calls actually aren't the best for me. Can this be done through email? Can this be done through text? A lot of my friends know that I'm not a super big fan of talking on the phone, which is so funny because I did so much of it as a kid, but we didn't really have any other ways of communicating, you know? So a lot of them know that I just am a texter, and if you want to have a conversation with me, you can text me, email me, call me, beat me if you want to reach me. Just kidding. Kim Possible, right? So the best way to be in contact is just with the written word, because it helps me with my delayed processing, and it helps me not interrupt people and be able to express myself in a way that I want to express myself and know that I'm getting my message across in the best way possible. So yes, be yourself. If the phone is not for you, don't be hard on yourself. You don't have to be on the phone if you don't want to be. There are ways around it. And if you have to be on the phone, I just gave you some ideas to make it a little bit easier for yourself. As I mentioned, the first thing I said is I don't know if I'm the best person to give this advice because I still struggle on the phone. It's not my favorite. I would totally rather do things another way, but sometimes you can't get around it. Sometimes you have to make a phone call. So I hope that this helped. The big reason I made the video is so that we could bring up the conversation, and I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. As you know, in our community, we comment, have a conversation down in the comments about what works for us, what our experiences are, and it really helps our whole community feel more comforted, not alone, gives good advice. So definitely leave your thoughts in the comments. I hope that you have a great weekend, and I will see you on Monday. Bye.